Hello, I'm Ersula Odom, and welcome to Wisdom and Young Legend. And we're about to have another wonderful conversation with a young person, and I get to find out what is up here and all the generations of wisdom that have come through to make her who she is. Now, I had a wonderful opportunity to meet the guest today on a panel where we talked about Maya Angelou. And so I know she's an awesome young lady, but now it's time for you to figure that out and see just who she is. Her name is Yuki Jackson. Hello, Yuki.
Hi.
How are you?
I am great. I am enjoying every moment. Glad to be here with you.
Great. I'm so glad you are. So, Yuki, tell them who you are and what you do.
Yes, so like you said, my name is Yuki Jackson. I am a poet. I identify as a poet, although I also, write, some essays as well. I am a teacher of writing. So both through a after school program that I founded called the Battleground in a neighborhood called Sulphur Springs, is a neighborhood in Tampa. And I also teach first year writing. I've taught first year writing for the past couple years at the college level. And for the past year, I've been teaching it at Ringling College of Art and Design in Sarasota. And so, yeah, I live in the Tampa Bay area and just like writing and working and enjoying the pandemic.
Now, you smile when you say that, but I got a funny feeling I understand why. Because earlier when we were talking, you mentioned that you were an only child, and so am I. So, yes, we may be able to be out in the public, but we get our energy, or from what I know, some of us get our energy from being alone and thinking and doing and getting things done. So, when we're on lockdown, sometimes it's okay, you
Yeah.
know. Um, Now, I understand that the name of your group, Battleground, has an interesting history. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Battleground was actually born out of a series of events that happened. So I was working as a part-time library assistant in a library in the Sulphur Springs neighborhood of Tampa. In that neighborhood, there's a lot of violence, high crime rates and high poverty rates. And so there's issues, but it's very vibrant, amazing, beauty within that neighborhood as well. Anyway, so I developed this very strong affection, for this beautiful, vibrant neighborhood, and especially with the kids, who would come to the library. And so back in April of 2017, in a course of 5 days, unfortunately, we had three gun shootings right outside the library. And so, what happened was in that first shooting, actually, all the shootings, they were all, boys, who the ones who were shooting and both the ones who were targeted were boys under the age of 14. And so, what happened was during the first lockdown, as I was, of course, like taking the steps to, protect the kids as best as I could, sort of my inner voice or my intuition just clicked in very strongly and was very clear. And so I came up, on the spot during the lockdown with this idea of like, I need to create an after school program, call it the Battleground, and incorporate martial arts, drawing upon what I remembered from a previous relationship of, an ex who did like martial arts, and, he was from the hood, and he talked about how much doing martial arts helped him develop discipline and just approach every life obstacle with that kind of mentality. And also how, I remember him talking about how it's actually designed to not be violent, help people to overcome that tendency to want to use violence. And then also, in my mind, it came up, okay, and then also, so along with martial arts, also teach poetry based on hip hop lyricism, and that just goes, and that came out of just me being a poet and knowing how much poetry has helped me express myself. And seeing it in other people, and then the hip hop lyricism came. I think somewhere in my subconscious, because I used to be a big, or I still am, I was a really big Wu-Tang Clan fan, the rap group. And so since they, I think I had made that association in my brain of like hip hop and martial arts, since they have a lot of martial arts imagery. And then coupled with the fact that I'm biracial. My dad is Black and my mom is Japanese, and so in East Asian, that's where, obviously martial arts comes from. And so I think even within me physically, there's this sort of dichotomy and, that mixture of the cultures and the references all just sort of, obviously I wasn't conscious of all this with in that moment of having, trust me, it was like, it wasn't that deep or that, but it's like when it was in that moment, it was instinctual. It was just like, this is what you need to do. You know what I mean? But if I were to unpack it all, unravel, all the threads that like led up to that, it was like, okay, this is all what led to that. And, and at the Battleground, I think that wisdom came out of just like, it's the battleground, right? It's life. Like that's, but instead of, sort of just thinking of the battle in terms of like this physical battle or shooting each other or using, physical violence toward one another, it was more, I wanted to, develop and provide, the tool for youth specifically in the neighborhood to be able to, provide a tool through the program of like winning the battle within themselves, that daily battle, of like overcoming, I know I have it, I mean, everyone, it was just that like daily battle. And a lot of times it's a moment to moment battle of like winning over my own, our own inner negativity, this tendency to put ourselves down, to not value ourselves, to not value other people, to give up on our, just like so many kind of self-sabotage, sabotaging type of tendencies you have to constantly win over, and it's no joke, obviously. So I think it's that kind of that sort of metaphor of it being a battle, I felt is most appropriate for this particular endeavor. So
when you were talking about that moment, it reminds me of what the show is all about, is wisdom and young legends. So you took the wisdom of the ages and it was visceral. All the things that your body knew, all the things that your head knew, the things that you'd learned, that is, and all of the things that you had as a plan for life just came together in that moment. And they say that that's what happens when someone is stepping out of danger, and that's the moment that you were in too. But if you say to someone, a car is coming, you need to take your foot and move it 2 steps to the left, then that person has already been hit. So when they find out or hear that a car is coming and it's about to hit them, their whole body goes into action, and it becomes a reflex, and it's visceral. It's a visceral moment. It's from within, and it causes you to take your whole body and soul to react to this particular moment, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. And the other thing that you mentioned when you were talking about martial arts and hip hop, um, poetry and what have you. It reminded me of when I was in school and I took a record called Bankati. Nope, no, that's not it. It was Bongo Rock and Taekwondo. I took a class in Taekwondo and I put the two together and choreographed a dance routine for the dance show. And it was a big hit because I took a football player and
Oh,
taught him how to dance, and he
oh,
had all this muscle, and and there's a story behind that. Apparently, that made him very popular on campus too. I had no idea about that part until many, many years later.
oh,
But taking this muscle man and turning him into a dancer, everybody kind of loved that.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Transforming it.
So I asked you earlier about what 5-year-old Yuki was like, and I'd like you to share that again and how she impacts your life today.
Yeah, definitely. So, me at 5, I was very, in a lot of ways, very similar. So I was, kind of in my head a lot, which I still am, and very imaginative. 5-year-old Yuki was an only child, and so she drew upon her own inner world to create fun for herself. And I remember also, like, I can't remember if I knew how to read yet or how much I knew how to read if I did at that point, but I just always was always drawn to books. And through my mother, she had really instilled in me just sort of the joy of books. And so yeah, I just remember always like having books and playing with them or looking at them, and maybe I was pretending to read them. um and 5-year-old Yuki, and it's very similar to today's Yuki, is also very like sensitive and would like cry a lot. So yeah, I still do that. And yeah, so just very sensitive, imaginative, kind of weird, kind of quirky. I know for me, I think partly, not partly, I think a lot actually attributed to just like my having grown up biracial, and like I grew up a lot in Japan, and so, and then like I wasn't accepted by my family because I'm black, by my Japanese side of the family because I'm black. So it's like I always grew up kind of feeling like an outsider, even within my own like family, like both sides, and within the country I'm in and the culture, So I kind of always developed this like I'm in a situation, but I'm always slightly detached from it, if that makes sense. And so yeah, so I think 5-year-old Yuki was very much in that space too, where I was like, I think I always felt a little bit separate, if that makes sense. And yeah.
Hmm. So I want to ask questions about that. I don't want to get too personal, but
It's,
when you're talking about not being accepted on by basically both sides of your family,
yeah.
how does that manifest itself? What does one do to make a child feel that way or a person feel that way? Not to call anybody's name, but what
Yeah.
are some maybe unconscious things that people do?
Sure. Well, I mean, for their credit, like, so the black side of my family never, has never rejected me. They've always embraced me. It's just that I always, just because of like how they grew up and their culture and their religion and things like that, I always felt different from them. So that was probably more just internally based in terms of the alienation I felt from them. It wasn't because they mistreated me. There
Okay.
some situations where I kind of felt um maybe not as included, but but it was more from the Japanese side, I would say, in terms of the mistreatment. So it would manifest through things like so basically, um when my mother had decided to marry a black man, which I think they were sort of anticipating because that's all she would date. She was, you know, this is in the 70s in Japan. She like the story is like when she was like in middle school, actually. This is like in the 60s or something. And she turned on the radio in Japan. And this is when soul music, like a soul music, had just come on the radio in Japan. And she turned it on and she said she was like, what is this? Like, this is it. Like, whatever this is and whatever culture this sound is coming from, this is me. She just felt this like intense connection to it.
Wow.
Through music, yeah, through soul music that she heard on the Japanese radio. And so from there, anyway, so then from there she would, was then met, black men and was anyway. So then that was her whole thing. But I think when it came to I don't think they thought she's going to marry one. And so she decided to marry. That was a big issue for them. They were they're very traditional, and they're also kind of like well-to-do. So I think they're more worried about the image. How is this going to make our family look to other people? And so but my mom is she's very like rebellious, and like she's just a person who's like knows who she is, knows what she wants, knows what she and she just goes for it. She doesn't care what people think. And so when she said she's gonna marry, they said, well, if you ever have a child from this union, they're not going to be welcome in our home. And so even though I grew up as a child in Japan, I wasn't allowed to go to my grandparents' home. And so things like that. But what's kind of weird and was mixed messaging was that, so even though I wasn't allowed to go to their house, they lived in Tokyo, because people will find out that they have a black, grandchild, but they would like come and visit us, or they would like send gifts in the mail, or, you know what I mean? So it was like this, so it wasn't that I was completely ostracized or cut off, but the messaging was like, we acknowledge you, we will even give you gifts or come see but we're going to hide you like from our lives. So I was like, I was hidden, I was like, kind of ashamed, right? And so I think that obviously impacted me and how I view myself, right? Where I was for a long time, I was like, always kind of felt like, oh, like I think I internalized that sense of shame. You know what I mean? Like, even if there's no situation or no reason for me to feel ashamed of it's like, it's something I care, and that we're now, I'm really starting to address, and it just goes to show how, how we, may treat children. Obviously that, I don't think they could have imagined or anticipated or thought, oh, okay, how this is like, our own sort of fear, right, is going to negatively impact this person, for their life and influence them. Obviously, I don't think they're consciously doing that, but it just goes to show how that happens, So.
Well, a couple of things. When you said there was that immediate connection that your mother had with the music and then the people, I experienced that with you, and I said so. Because when I saw you, you reminded me of my favorite second cousin's children, and you have their last name. So I felt this immediate kinship to you, even though we had never spoken before. And there was no basis for that, except you reminded me of something or someone that I really care about. And then you turned out to be a really nice person too. So, but back to your point about people not knowing the impact of their actions on young people.
Yeah.
I had a situation somewhat similar, but it was total. Well, my reaction was similar, but the situation was much different. My mother had emotional problems,
Mm.
And the shame was there for years and years because it's like, oh my God, somebody's going to find out that my mother's like this. And
Mm.
she's, oh, and, and back to what you and I do, I wrote a book. And in that book, I wrote about her.
Mm.
And that was the first time I had emotional freedom.
Mm.
I wrote that my mother was mentally ill and the world didn't crash in.
Yeah.
My friends didn't leave me.
Yeah.
Nobody even said a word. They didn't care,
Yeah.
you know. And if they do, they didn't say anything. They did not say anything to me, so it doesn't matter. But and it's been some time. So writing
Yeah.
about that which is emotionally traumatizing
Absolutely.
can release that trauma. And I
Uh,
think that's one of the benefits of writing. Do you
yeah.
find that to be true?
Oh, 100%, 100%. I mean, I think, and even that's how, I started writing, when I was a teen, I was, was just like writing in my diary or journal and just, expressing my thoughts and what I went through. And then it would just really naturally turn into poems, and then I would read poems and, there's just something for me, it was specifically about, writing and specifically about poetry. And I think poetry, if I think about it, I think it's really because there's an element to it where it's very not non-linear,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't have to make sense in a way, and it's non-linear, and it's kind of fragments sometimes, and it's like it may be some imagery of a particular event or a scene mixed in with a thought or an emotion, so kind of the nature of what a poem is to me, is very representative of how life occurs, because,
Mm.
and I think especially for people who've gone through trauma, which is assuming everybody, at some point or another. But I think the nature of trauma is like, even I know for me, it's a recollection in like clumps. It's not this kind of neat little like, oh, here it all, it's kind of it just over time. It's like, oh, I remember this detail or that. And then, but in between that, I felt this way, but I kind of, this part is fuzzy, And so to me, that nebulous, nonlinear, it was like a ball or something, yeah, I think that's what a poem is. I think that's why I was drawn to it specifically, because it feels, um, at the intersection of, consciousness and unconsciousness, and life and death, and suffering and joy. I just think I experience and see poetry as really being, sort of the, to tap on like, it's the vein, or sort of like the pulse of like all phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why a lot of times people aren't even trying to write poetry. What's so interesting too is like more and more I realize like adults or kids, people who don't even consider themselves to be writers or poets actually either at some point in their life or even currently are like secretly like writing or will write poems. It's just almost like it is just like what our life wants to do to like
Mm-hmm.
try to make sense, of what we go through. So it's amazing.
Actually, you've said so much. When I started writing, that is exactly what happened to me. I had been keeping journals, and over the years, I just put moments down, things that motivated me, and all of a sudden, I had a lot of it, and I decided I wanted to write from those journals. But that's not what I ended up writing. I wrote the life lessons learned at my grandmother's feet and the wit and the wisdom. Um, but one of the things I say quite often is that we live our lives in sound bites. And if you don't keep a journal, that's what you will remember, just a little sound bites here and there. And when you talked about how your writing happens in clumps, that happened to me just last week.
Oh,
And I woke up and I had this statement on my mind, and it was all joyful and whatever. And I wrote it down, and that thing took on a life of its own. It did not end up the way that I thought it would.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was actually really rather nice in the end. And it's not about my life. It was just putting these words together. And I liked the way it ended up. But I I probably will publish it as a part of a collection because I don't want anybody to think I was talking about them because
Oh,
it's kind of funny.
yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah, yeah,
To free ourselves, but to also not, feel like we're kind of unfairly maybe, kind of blaming or, exposing others, but then at the same time, if we like interact with people, then,
hmm
it's inevitable. We're going to talk about people who we're here in this world together, so it's tricky. It's
yeah.
tricky.
There was a sign somewhere that someone posted said that you needed to be aware a writer is at work, and if you come within my space, you may find yourself in my book or something like that. It was a neatly
I love that.
worded document, but it was basically saying enter at your own risk because you may end up a character in my book.
Pretty,
you know,
pretty much.
yeah, because we do write about things that happen.
Yeah.
That's life is the best example there is
Yeah.
for creativity and fascination and wonder. Like, how did that happen? You
Completely.
know. hmm So, what are some of your goals? What are you looking to do?
Um, right now, I am focusing on continuing to publish my work. So I've been, I have some poems that have been published in some like literary journals and whatnot. And so I'm continuing to do that. I also have a full length poetry collection, and it's actually, it tells a story, but it's through a series of poems.
Ah,
Yeah, so I have that out at a few places right now. I'm trying to get that published. I've also, you know, I've recently been writing. Had the opportunity to share some of my work through a local publication and Creative Loafing. So I'm going to continue to do that. But I want to. Essentially, I want to yeah, just like get my writing to as many people as possible, and also be able to have an opportunity where, and this is the part that, this is the thing, like, so there's the like goals, and then there's like how to do the goals, right, or how to make it
mhm,
happen. So I think sometimes the how to make it happen part becomes the goal, but I'm trying to resist that tendency. You know what I'm
mhm,
saying? Because then it's
mhm,
like money based. So I'm trying to, but we also need money, right, to do things.
mhm,
So
mhm,
ultimately, I'll say it like, my goal is to also be able to obtain enough resources and the money, or whatever it is that I need in order to facilitate, when things sort of kind of go back to more a situation where we're able to meet in person, and we resume with the Battleground program. My goal ultimately is to build. I want a building, our own building, because right now we've been operating out of the local public library there. But I already have like a property picked out, in that, it's like an empty lot. I'm like, okay, that's my lot. So I want that lot. It's in a perfect place. Anyway, I've like thought, so I've like, in my head, long term, I want to build a spot for the Battleground, and then have it be a building where I facilitate not only the poetry and martial arts, which that'll be the foundational program, but to ultimately for it to be like a arts center in that neighborhood and have guests like people like you know, different writers or different, you know, like a painter, you know, one week have like a person like a painter come in and teach like a painting class, or another week, you know, or have somebody who's like a photographer, a professional photographer come and talk about that, or, you know, a music studio, you know, anyway, all types of arts. I would like to really facilitate that within that building, you know. So that's my goal. So how I'm going to do that, I don't know. So I'm trying to not get too caught up in that part, but that's my,
Well, you
yeah.
put it out in the universe, and maybe someone who's listening to this or watching this, okay, you want to do something really nice? This might be the person that you need to help out. Okay. This is the reason that you are here. This unknown, wonderful person sitting out there watching this show.
Yeah. Hi.
Now, now you
Yeah.
want to know something really funny about what you just said? And I realize that it's not a part of my dream anymore. But when I left college, I was in theater and dance, and I had a desire to have an art center.
Oh.
I gave it a name. It was called the Stevens International Cultural Center.
Oh.
And because our dorms were quadrangles, however you pronounce that today, but it was a square. Okay. And I envisioned having a courtyard like that, and the segments around the courtyard would be different cultures. Okay. And that those different cultures would come out and display their background and their dance and their music and their art and whatever, and we would exchange that, and it would always be something that was going on that would be educational based, fun based, that gives you an experience of the world
Yeah.
right in one spot. So it was the Stevens International Cultural Center. So I get what you're saying. I think that would be a wonderful experience to be able to do the things that you're talking about all in one place, you know.
You. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
It's gonna happen. I just don't know when or how. But yeah, I feel it's gonna happen.
yeah. Yeah. So, how do people get in touch with you?
You can find me. I think the best way is to go to my website, which is yukijackson.com. My first name is spelled Yuki, last name Jackson.com. And so, you know, on my website, there's, you know, links to different, you know, my writings and stuff like that. Some, you know, that have been published, but also, you know, my social media, you know, some of the links are on there. If you're on Instagram or Twitter, I'm on there. And so, yeah. And then, you know, I think a link to my email is also through my website. So you can hit me up.
All right. This has been a wonderful conversation, and we must continue. As you realize your goals and your dreams, come back and talk about exactly how that's manifested itself.
Thank you.
And yeah, yeah, yeah. So, to those of you that are watching us today, thank you so very much for taking your time to be here with us. And I am Ersula Odom, and I'm the CEO of Sula Too, and we make old new in everything that we do, in that we capture, preserve, and present legacy information in any form possible, from books to legacy walls, to videos, or to live performances. Whatever it takes to get the word out about the legend and legendary people that have walked this earth, that's what we do. And until next time, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.